I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
We would like to dedicate this episode to Mary Higgins Clark. She paved the way for so many mystery writers. On January 31st, the mystery world lost an icon. Mary Higgins Clark has passed away. She will be very missed in the mystery world. I have heard from quite a few authors and they are devastated. Carolyn K. Reedy, president and CEO of Simon & Schuster, whom Mary Higgins Clark had a long history with, put out a statement on Mary's website, and I'm going to read a small portion of it. It is impossible to overestimate the importance of Mary's contribution to our success and her role in the modern history of Simon & Schuster. Beginning in 1975 with the publication of Where Are the Children, each of her 56 books have been bestsellers. There are more than 100 million copies of her books in print in the United States. They are international bestsellers and have translated into every major and many less well-known languages. But these storied publishing accomplishments tell only a small part of the large story that is Mary Higgins Clark. She was simply a remarkable woman who overcame an early life of hardship and challenge, never doubting her ability as a natural-born storyteller, and who persevered through trial and rejection until she at last achieved her holy grail of being a published author. I started reading Mary Higgins Clark probably way too young for a child to be reading them, but in 1975, I was 11 years old, and I remember reading Where Are the Children and was blown away.
Back in the day, in the 70s, when you were reading the books, they came in the mail. We belonged to a mystery book club. Every month or two, I can't remember now how often it was, we would get a new book, and we were always so excited when it was a Mary Higgins Clark, because she was the queen of mysteries. She was right up there with Agatha Christie. She was more contemporary, of course. She did write some historical novels also, but we always look forward to her books. She will be sorely missed.
Hello, and welcome to the 99th episode of It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club podcast. On today's episode, we will feature an interview with Lee Goldberg.
New York Times best-selling author Lee Goldberg is a two-time Edgar Award winner, two-time Shamus Award nominee, whose many TV writing and producing credits include Martial Law, seaQuest, Diagnosis Murder, Nero Wolfe, Monk, and The Glades. He was co-author of the Fox and O'Hare series with Janet Ivanovich.
Lee's book, The Lost Hills, is the book we're going to talk about, his latest. A video of Deputy Eve Ronan's off-duty arrest of an abusive movie star goes viral, turning her into a popular hero at a time when the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is plagued by scandal. The sheriff, desperate for more positive press, makes Eve the youngest female homicide detective in the department's history. Now Eve, with a lot to learn and resented by her colleagues, has to justify her new badge. Her chance comes when she and her burned-out, soon-to-retire partner are called to the blood-spattered home of a missing single mother and her two kids. The horrific carnage screams multiple murder, but there are no corpses. Eve has to rely on her instincts and tenacity to find the bodies and capture the vicious killer, all while battling her own insecurities and mounting pressure from the media, her bosses, and the bereaved family. It's a deadly ordeal that will either prove her skills or totally destroy her.
We would like to introduce Lee Goldberg, who has written a wonderful mystery called Lost Hills.
Hi, it's great to be here.
You've written for the TV series Diagnosis Murder and Monk, among others, and you've co-written books with Janet Ivanovich, as well as having written quite a few books solo. What can you tell us about the different methods of writing? Which is your favorite and or easiest?
Well, they're all so different. When you're writing for television, you're writing essentially a blueprint for other people to do their work, for the director to direct, the location manager to find locations, the costume designer to make costumes. So you're telling a story, but you're really providing a worksheet for others to build on. It's not as detailed as a novel. It's driven by dialogue and action, so I can write a script fairly quickly. But it's also an entirely different way of telling stories. If people don't say it and people don't do it, the audience isn't aware of it. The story has to be conveyed entirely through action and dialogue. And in a very set amount of time and on a very limited number of locations, it's an entirely different medium than writing a book. Writing a book, you're all those people I mentioned. You're the director, you're the location manager, you're the costume designer, you're the cameraman, you're everybody. Plus, you have the power to go inside people's heads and provide all kinds of exposition and backstory to put things into context. It's another different way of telling a story, and harder. It takes me typically 5 months to write a novel, and I write 2 novels a year. Now, when you're co-authoring, whether it's a novel or co-authoring a script, you have to match your writing with another individual. You have to create a shared voice, and you also have to divvy up the work. Each collaboration is different. It really is based on the personalities of the people involved. Television is always a collaboration. You're in a writer's room, you're dealing with other writers, you're dealing with producers, you're dealing with input from the network and the actors and the director. When you're co-authoring a book, it's a little more difficult because usually a book is a single person's point of view and a single voice. It's much harder to collaborate on that. But once you do find that shared voice, it goes pretty smoothly. Janet and I had a wonderful time, and I'm really hoping that she'll finally be able to succeed on her own now that she has the benefit of my experience and my savvy.
Yeah, she's one of those new up-and-comers.
I'm sure she appreciates all your help.
I wish she'd stop borrowing money from me.
Well, your new book, Lost Hills, introduces a new series and a protagonist. Eve Ronan is young and has a lot to learn. What inspired you to portray her not as a seasoned investigator, but one who's just starting out?
The character arose from the story, and I may be jumping ahead and stepping on one of your other incisive, searing, soul-tearing questions, but I'd actually gone to a homicide investigator's training seminar to research a different book that I had in mind. It was a seminar limited only to professional homicide investigators. I managed to finagle my way in as one of 2 civilians in that group. And at that seminar, they presented a case as an example of why it's necessary for homicide investigators to approach each crime scene as if it's their very first, to leave all their preconceived notions and cop common sense in their patrol car. It was a fascinating case. I couldn't get it out of my head. I couldn't go to sleep that night thinking about that case, and I realized I could make that into a novel. I saw immediately the narrative spine that I could create from that case, but also the character. If it's required that to solve this case, you have to put all your experience and cop common sense aside, what if the investigator doesn't have experience or cop common sense yet? How do you become a homicide investigator if you don't already have that skill? Because usually that's a job given to someone with a great deal of experience. So the idea of a neophyte, someone who gets the job because she doesn't deserve it and has to prove herself, started to form in my mind, and that's how Eve Ronan was born. But also, I read a lot of crime fiction. I watch a lot of crime fiction, and I'm just tired of the grizzled, experienced, bitter homicide detective with the dark past, the failed marriages, the serial killer who slaughtered his family, and all that crap. I wanted a clean slate. I wanted somebody who was young and new and making mistakes, who wasn't as self-assured and confident as your typical hero in one of these novels.
So since you started down that road, what is the true crime that you based the story on?
I'm not going to tell you. I don't want people to get ahead of my book.
Had to be a good one.
It was a good one. And here's what's interesting about it. It was so bizarre that had I used everything that was in that case, people would have said, oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, no real thing would happen that way. In fact, the strangest elements in my book, for instance, the gorilla suit, are from the real case.
You know, that's got to be Googleable. I'm going to Google that.
It what's interesting about the gorilla suit was the gorilla suit didn't play a role in the actual case. When the cops arrested the killer, searched his house, they found a full gorilla suit in his closet and never found out why he had it. He wouldn't talk, he wouldn't say. Considering how bizarre the rest of the case was, it lit my imagination, and I decided to make the gorilla suit have a function in the story, or at least in his psyche.
How difficult was it to write as a woman?
You know, women are not alien creatures from another planet or a parallel dimension. They're part of our everyday lives. I come from a single-parent household. I had a very strong mother. I have strong sisters. I've been married for 30 years. I have a 25-year-old daughter. So I've been surrounded by really strong, vivid, colorful women. Also, I've been writing in a women's voice before. I wrote 15 monk novels from the first-person point of view of Monk's assistant. So I've had some grounding in that. And I wrote 5 books with this lady, Janet Ivanovich, who has a unique insight into women, and I probably gleaned a little from her over 5 novels about how to write a woman. I don't find it hard. I cringe when I read some men writing women who do it from this strange Playboy magazine male gaze, where apparently all women think about is their own breasts and what men are thinking about those breasts. It's just ridiculous.
Exactly.
Well, now, it's very understandable to partner a young detective with one who's older with more experience, and I really like the relationship between the two. However, Duncan Pavone is counting down the days to his retirement. Is he going to remain a part of the series?
Yes, the second book is already written in copy editing now. It picks up just a couple of weeks after the events of Lost Hills. So he's still her partner, still counting down the days. I imagine he might be in one more book after this, but he will always be part of her life. He's not going to disappear from the scene. I put a ticking clock on how many days he's going to be in the department. That's a real time limit.
I thought maybe he'd put off his retirement, but I guess not.
Well, I also think that changing up her partners and evolving Eve's world will keep the series fresh. I don't want to do the same book again and again. I want to see her grow and gain experience and have more conflicts with the people around her. And I think that I could get too comfortable having her with Duncan Pavone. But he'll always be, I'm not going to reveal the second book. I have found a way to keep her in his life so that she can turn to him for advice when she needs it.
I've always kind of enjoyed when, even once they retire, they can still be somebody that she can go to for advice.
Retirement isn't death. They're still around.
The book was an excellent police procedural. Did you write the ending before the rest of the story, or did the ending find its own way?
Neither. I outline all my books, so I know exactly where I'm going before I start writing. I don't believe in making it up as you go along, particularly in a mystery. And in this case, I had the real case as a guide, the real homicide. So I knew how I was going to end my book, and I knew the clues that were going to get me there. So the joy was in discovering the characters and their voices along the way.
Well, I guess that pretty much answered the next question. There was really no part of the book that surprised you.
Oh, no, that's not true. I was surprised all the time. There were always moments, character moments, and some interactions that I hadn't anticipated. There were a couple clues that I discovered along the way that I put in. And the finale took shape. I had the broad strokes of how it was going to be, but the specifics came to me while I was doing it. So no, there's always surprise. I mean, I have an outline, but it's not super detailed. So there's plenty of room for me to color between the lines and have a sense of discovery each day. It's not like everything I do is already laid out in front of me. It's sort of like knowing I'm going on a trip from Los Angeles to New York, and I'm going to take the XYZ freeway the whole way. But that doesn't mean you're not going to find side trips or have encounters along the way or find a different route to get to New York. But you know you're going to New York, and you know you have whatever it is, 10 days to get there. It's sort of like that. I have a roadmap, but it doesn't mean I always stick to it.
Now, I'm curious, how do you research your books?
Every book is different. Every topic is different. I read lots of books. I interview experts in the field. And in the case of Lost Hills, as I mentioned before, I had another book in mind, and I went to this homicide investigators conference to research that, just to get some details, some talk, some anecdotes, the details that will give my book a sense of authenticity, even though my books aren't authentic at all. That's all you really want, is a few facts that will ground the reader in reality, or at least get the reader to think they're being grounded in reality, so they'll buy all the stuff that you're making up.
Well, this book, you mentioned the climax. For anybody who hasn't read the book, the climax will keep you on the edge of your seat. You will have to finish the book to find out what happened. You just can't put that book down when you get there.
I'm glad to hear that.
this book was really very short as far as pages go, but there was a lot packed in there.
That was wholly intentional. I wanted to write a very tight, lean, fast-moving book. I was brutal about cutting my own prose. I wanted the authority